Nicole Schabus. She is a law professor at Thompson Rivers University and joins us from Kamloops in British Columbia, where the remains of 215 Indigenous children were found at a similar residential school just a few weeks ago. This is such a shocking discovery, but knowing what you know about the treatment of these Indigenous children and Indigenous people in Canada, are you shocked by this?
Well, it touches everybody's heart, but it is not unexpected. The Canadian Truth and Reconciliation Commission was calling on the government of Canada to do this really difficult work on the missing, really, and murdered Indigenous children at these residential schools and on the unmarked graves. And actually, it has fallen to the respective Indigenous nations who have done the work. The government of Canada has not sufficiently followed up on these calls to action. So in this case, it was the Houses First Nation that did the ground-penetrating radar search of their grounds and found 751 unmarked graves on their grounds. So that is definitely a very disturbing discovery, just like what happened here in Secwepemc territory at the Kamloops to Secwepemc. And I just want to clarify, those were not Indigenous schools. Those were schools run by the Catholic Church in both cases. And the system was implemented by the Canadian state, and it constitutes genocide.
So explain to us what these residential schools were for and the policy Canada had of removing these children from their families.
Yeah, so it was mandatory under Canadian law for status Indians to attend these residential schools. So if the parents tried to stop their children from being taken, they could actually be arrested. So this system was implemented by way of law and policy. And so that's what makes it really insidious, and that's what constitutes the international crime of genocide. Because if you forcefully remove children from one group and place them into another group. And you have written below about assimilation into the society, but it is more than that. It really has the genocidal intent and makes out the definition under the Genocide Convention.
So do we know how these children died? I mean, were they killed? Were they died of other causes?
There's going to be a number of causes, and so all the nations that have been leading on this work are making it very clear that this is the first stage of the work, and now more work has to be done, including to identify cause of death. We do know that at a number of the residential schools, nutritional experiments took place, but really, if you talk to the survivors, and I very strongly recommend that you do that, they all speak about the lack of food, the bad food. There was forced labor, there was effectively torture, there was sexual abuse, there were abortions that were conducted in these schools after Indigenous girls, children have been raped, etc. So, there's going to be a number of causes of death here.
You say that it was the Indigenous community that has been searching for these graves, and that these children were forcibly taken from their homes and never returned. Has the Canadian government never done anything to try to find out what happened to them?
So that is one of the issues. So the work on the children that never made it home from the residential school has not been done to the extent called for by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission themselves wanted to do this work, and the Canadian state, and especially also the Catholic Church, did not give them full access to the records, which is why they couldn't complete the work or do the work, and hence left a call to action to the Canadian state to continue on with this work. So the burden is really, or the obligation is in large part on the Canadian state, but they are really the ones who have perpetrated, in this case, the crime of genocide. So it is important that Indigenous peoples actually be in the lead and be decision makers regarding next steps here, and that there's also international oversight. That's what Indigenous peoples have been calling for.
We heard from the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying Canada must learn from our past. It hardly seems like a strong enough statement to make. What needs to come next? I mean, what does the government need to do?
And let me be clear, this is not just the past. If you are in this place, so our law school is located right in Secwepemc territory at the Kamloops de Secwepemc, where the remains of 215 children have been located, and ongoing work is happening. And you can feel the intergenerational trauma. There are living survivors of the residential school. This is alive. There are elders being flashed back to being children. They remember the other kids that didn't come back, and they've always wondered about them. And now they have this really disturbing evidence about the burials, about the numbers, about how they were buried. It is very troubling. So yes, it is not good enough. And it is not okay to say that we need to learn from our history. This is happening today too. There's still disproportionate and very high, actually, overrepresentation of Indigenous children in child welfare systems. And this is the intergenerational impact of a genocidal system that was implemented by the Canadian state.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicole Schabus in Kamloops, British Columbia.